This is Mace-plaining, and this is about Tommy John surgery. Specifically, recently, actually last week, we covered Corbin Burns and the comments he made as he walked off the field. This is before he had his MRI, and we knew what was to come. But it turns out Corbin Burns, the big signing the 6-year deal, the Arizona Diamondbacks, is about to miss the next at least 162 games with UCL reconstruction surgery. And that sucks. We lost Garrett Cole earlier in the season. We lose a lot of studs, especially free agent studs, at least once in their career. It feels like it's happening more and more and more, right? We don't actually know. Actually, we do actually know. I'm about to tell you all about it. But fortunately, Tommy John, the connotation of needing Tommy John as someone who has got it also, I had it in 2017. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Is no longer, I think, super dreaded because of the effect it has on your arm. So I want to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of what happens in Tommy John. How, all these different variations of the surgery, like what is under the umbrella of the surgery anyways, and we talk a lot about the causes and the things that, players can do or not do in order to avoid the surgery, but it's becoming a foregone conclusion and quickly. And it's not about whether or not you're going to come back at least after your first go on the merry-go-round. It's not so much about whether or not you're going to be able to come back and be effective, because that is getting better and better and better. It's about the time that you're missing, how long it takes to go from A to Z through that process. That is the worst part. That was the worst part for me. I have no problem doing the physical work. I have no problem keeping focused. I had problems waiting. And I think that's the thing that bothers most players, but I think the people it bothers maybe the most in the entire situation is the fans that lose the best pitchers in the league and don't get to watch them it takes so long that they might even forget that they're there. So let's talk a little bit about the ins and outs of Tommy John surgery. Okay, so we talked, Corbin Burns went down, said, my elbow's toast. He knew immediately. He knew that something was wrong, and it wasn't, you go out there, you feel a twinge, you throw a couple pitches, it kind of goes away a little bit, and then you're sore after the game. That is different. When you feel something and it keeps feeling that way and it's only getting worse, something probably broke. And if something broke, that is not a very good feeling. So this is the definition of Tommy John, okay? As this is from MLB.com's glossary, if you guys want to go see it, and this is the first paragraph. It says, Tommy John surgery is a procedure in which a partial or fully torn ulnar collateral ligament, aka the UCL, on the medial side of the elbow, which is the inside of the elbow, is replaced with a tendon from another part of the patient's body or from a cadaver. Now, I didn't think that this definition was going to end with the word cadaver, but here we are. For example, the two places you can get your tendon taken from are either your wrist, not everyone has a tendon that's big enough in your wrist, or part of your hamstring that wraps around the inside of your knee. Unfortunately, that's the one your boy had. So the reason those two places, I'm not going to get super into it, but the reason those two places are the places to go with is because they basically more or less regenerate, not technically, but to where they function and it doesn't affect your ability for those parts of your body to move normally. Think of it as a chameleon's tail, just not as directly growing back as that. You can compensate in a positive way to where there's no lasting impact on you one way or the other. I will say, getting at your gracilis out of your hamstring sucks. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I told you a little bit about the recovery and why people aren't so worried about it when they need it. In an article written by Ronald Blum of the AP News, it says, in the 50 years since Dr. Frank Job's first Tommy John surgery, he is the doctor that invented the procedure. The operation has saved careers and earned fortunes. Los Angeles Dodgers head team physician Dr. Neil Elitrosh, who happens to be the person that is about to do Corbin Burns' surgery, estimates about 80% of the pitchers return to their previous level of competition at least. So At least 4 of every 5 guys are going to get back to where they were on the first time around. Boston Children's Hospital, which does a lot of these surgeries on the younger generation, because that is actually a lot of the surgeries, reports that it might be even higher, up to 90%. And in that 80%, they said almost every single guy at least competes again at some point. Like, very rarely are guys just done pitching in games after Tommy John surgery. It just doesn't happen that way anymore, which is a great thing. That is a phenomenal thing. But like I said, it's the recovery time, okay? It's the recovery time. Unfortunately, in a 2023 article written by the American Medical Association confirms that 35% of active players have gotten Tommy John. This is major league players. Of active major league players have gotten Tommy John at some point. That's 1 of every 3. 1 of every 3 pitchers right now has gotten Tommy John. That's nuts. With some estimates saying that the going rate could reach 40% very, very quickly in the next couple of years, which will mean 2 of every 5 players will have had Tommy John at that point. And the longer that you pitch, the higher the chances are that you will get it, which leads us to the Corbin Birds and the Garrett Coles of the world. Those guys are in their 30s when they sign free agency, and they've been pitching for a while. Chris Sale was a great example as well. That guy went like 8.5 years without getting hurt because he's like Gumby. But eventually, you will break something, probably. There is a very good chance because of the level at which these guys are exerting their body on a regular basis, okay? It's just a higher chance the longer you play. So, I got TJ, all right? I got TJ. And it happened to me in the middle of a game on an 0-2 curveball to Andrew McCutchen, which I then threw 3 straight balls after that and walked him, which then I got chewed out about later. We don't walk guys after going 0-2. Well, you know what? My elbow's gone, so leave me alone. This was against the WBC team that's getting ready to play in the tournament in 2017, and I blew out, okay? That's when I learned that you need Tommy John, and I had all the different versions of this explained to me. So this is all of the different procedures that can happen that are considered Tommy John, okay? We have the Job technique. We already mentioned him, which was the first one that was invented. It involved like drilling into bones and like figurating a new tendon in and out of your elbow. Sorry to be graphic, but that is what was happening. And then we had the docking technique. Pause. Docking is a refinement of the Job method where you're just kind of attaching it onto the bone as opposed to drilling through the bone, which caused other structural issues if not done correctly. Also, the drilling, there's a nerve that's with the tendon that they would have to move. There's a lot going on, and they wanted to stop doing that, okay? Then there's the modified Job technique, which is less invasive. They stopped using like all the other stuff up in the arm, leaving that to go. So they were able to isolate it. And then we have revision, which is just getting it again. Basically, it's just cleaning up the old one. We have repair and internal brace. That's the one you hear a lot. Basically, they repair your the one you have now, and then they add a brace underneath it to help fortify the structure of it, which is really popular because the rehab is much faster, and so is the healing. And then we have hybrid repair reconstruction. So sometimes they put partial brace in and they put the blah, 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 whatever. I had something similar to that where my tendon actually avulsed, so they docked it, and then they had already taken out my gracilis, so they just put it on top. So I technically have like a double UCL, and it's very unlikely that I tear that thing again. And if I do, that's on me. And then we have biologic augmentation, which is PRP. So you get an injection and of stem cells, and you hope that it heals itself. So like those are all the things that we have now. The last 2 we barely even had when I got it. So these are the ways these things have gone. They have changed a lot, but when I blew out, it was as cut and dry as possible. They were like, hey, it's gone. So we got to fix it. And then they ran me through all these things. And as you can imagine, it's very scary. But once you kind of wrap your head around it, then you got to deal with how long it is about to take. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline.
Today's episode of the Mayday Podcast is brought to you by Nutrafol. Is your team making you lose your hair? Well, it could be something else. Nutrafol is here to help you solve that problem. Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off our first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code FOUL. That's Nutrafol.com. Enter the promo code FOUL.
So this is a normal timeline for Tommy John surgery for those of you that are big Corbin Burns fans, Spencer Strider fans, or Garrett Cole fans, okay? 4 to 6 weeks, early rehab. That's when you see guys in the brace. The brace is at 45 degrees. I'll show you right here. And then over time, every couple weeks, you straighten it out because the number one thing they want to get is your flexibility back to where it's supposed to be. Full disclosure, when I had that brace on, I would wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and the lock would just be open and my arm would be like this. It'd just be straight. And I'd be like, put it back. And I thought I was doing something I shouldn't do. But at the end of that, I believe it's about 8 to 12 weeks. At the end of that, you get to take your brace off and then you get to fully straighten it out for the first time. And I was like, oh, I'm fine. So I had no issues with that at all. There was no atrophying and I didn't have to worry about it, which is great. A lot of guys do. The one thing that did suck though, my knee. So the gracilis coming out of your leg, that was the worst part ever. I came out of the surgery and I was like, what happened to my leg? Did you guys take my leg? Where is my leg? And they're like, no, it's there. Just can't move it. So I had to rehab that as well. You have to do hamstring curls and stuff to the point where you think you're moving and you're not. It is the most painful part. Being in an arm brace and then having the opposite leg wrapped up and then trying to walk with one crutch, maybe the hardest thing I've ever done. So I would highly recommend you avoid this with every fiber in your being if you can. So moving on, 4 to 6 months, you ramp out your workouts, you start to work on your mechanical work without throwing a baseball. So this is what you hear when a lot of guys are like, I want to clean up my mechanics. I want to fix things that I wasn't able to fix while I was playing. This is when you do that, okay? So there's a lot of dry work. It's a lot of just standing on a mound and doing like leg work. It's about doing workouts to fix your hip rotation and fix your flexibility and all this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, sometimes it gets a little bit robotic and repetitive and you get very like methodical in your motion, which I will talk about in a little bit. But then after about 6 months, you get to start throwing the baseball again and feeling your body once again. And this is maybe the hardest part. Like you're so close. You're on a field, you're wearing cleats again, you're on a mound again, and you can actually start to throw. And that's where a lot of guys have struggled to put their foot on the brakes and take it one step at a time. I was one of those people, but fortunately, this process was happening in the off season. So I didn't have games to watch and get all like fired up to go and play, right? Justin Steele, I don't know if you guys have seen the videos of him watching baseball in his brace, but he's like pacing around like he's just like wants to punch somebody. And I love it. Okay. And then 10 to 18, you're fully competitive return. You're going back and you're doing rehab appearances, depending on where you are in your career. You're hoping to get back quickly. Internal braces are faster, full reconstructions are slower, and it could be anywhere from 10 to 18. It took me 16 months to get back to the big leagues. And that sucked. But some guys go faster, which you'll have to basically play it by ear and see what you can do in order to get yourself back to 100% and then help your team as soon as you come back. Because there are some common issues that come up when you have Tommy John. And we have 2 guys right now that it's pretty stark with. And let's talk a little bit about them. One is Sandy Alcantara. Okay? So here's the main struggles when you try to return from Tommy John. Some things to pay attention to that aren't, I don't think, red flags for long-term struggles. I think they're just part of the kicking off the rust process. So here's the things that really that tend to happen. Sometimes your mechanics can get really robotic and you're not pitching as athletically as you used to, and that might diminish your stuff. So like you're not throwing with the ump anymore, and that could be subconscious. That could be worried about getting hurt again, but a lot of times you just get really robotic because you can't remember what it's like to just go compete, not think about your mechanics. That is something I saw a lot in the minor leagues, and guys really hurt their careers with that. Sometimes you have diminished stuff. You look up at the velo, you just don't see the velo, and things don't feel like they're moving like they should because your velo's not there. I will say Spencer Strider is in this group, right? He's used to throwing 98. He's throwing 95. His forcing fastball is getting shellacked, and he's not used to that happening, so he's relying on his slider a lot. He's been a two-pitch guy for a really long time. Those two pitches aren't quite where they need to be, though I do believe they're going to get back there. So he's learning how to use his other two pitches, his curveball and his changeup, to effectively get guys out while he waits. This is the dance, okay? The Braves are 10 games under 500. Spencer Strider knows he's a big part of them being successful, and he needs to contribute. But he also knows that he's not at 100% yet. So what do? What adjustments can you make if you look up and you see 94 instead of 98? That is what we're going to notice with Spencer Strider. Now, one thing I'm excited about is I think Spencer Strider is a very smart guy, and I think he loves the concept of pitching, and that we're going to see a new, different version of him for a bit, and then once the dominant version gets back into the forefront, he's going to lean back in there. But I'm interested to see how he makes adjustments. Sometimes your command gets messed up, which is happening to Sandy Alcantara. His stuff's fine. His velo's the same. Everything breaks the same. He's just not throwing it where he's not used to throwing it. That's another thing, that you're a little rusty. You're used to just like not having to think about something and having the ball go where it's supposed to go. That's something he's struggling with right now, and both these guys are really, really feeling it right now with their statistics and their performance on a major league mound, but both of which are normal. They're things that always happen. And neither team has a lot of luxury to like let them go hang out in AAA for a bit longer or whatever, because the Braves need to win and the Marlins need to trade Sandy. So they need them to play well. But if I were a betting man, I would bet on both of these guys getting pretty close, if not all the way, to their previous form at some point this season. And then the final thing is sometimes you're just hypersensitive and you're actually worried about getting hurt. But like I said, that's not a thing that's happening near as much anymore, because because the numbers have come out that like feeling stuff most of the time doesn't mean what they feel like it's going to mean, and people get over that much faster. 5-10 years ago, that was a bigger issue. Right now, it's not a huge issue, okay? So, why are people getting hurt? Let me quickly touch on this because we gotta put that in. Here's the deal. Pitchers know how to optimize themselves at the highest level. We are seeing more pitchers reach their ceiling faster than we ever have in the history of baseball. Okay? What that means is more effort put into more pitches in order to stand out in that way. That is not by its nature a bad thing, but it is a function of incentives being attached to effort, which is going to raise the risk of getting hurt. That's just logic, okay? Dr. Keith Meister, who did mine, has been very public in talking about how he thinks sweepers, a different way of spinning the ball, a different arm pattern that guys aren't used to, contributing to this and being a huge contributor to that. I think that's probably true. I also think that fastballs are contributing to it. I think that everyone's different, and where they put stress on their arm is different based on how they throw, but the effort is the thing that is constant, okay? So reining it in is the logical change in order to keep guys healthier. Now, you can do that as a starter a little bit. Like we see it with Zach Wheeler. He takes the foot off the gas a little bit sometimes, and some pitchers are kind of reverting back to that situation in order to get more out of themselves. But for the most part, young guys trying to get to the major leagues, that is not a luxury they can have, because they have to show how projectable they are and they can get big league hitters out. And showing off 101 is the way to do it. Fortunately, reining that in and taking away from that incentive from guys who aren't in the big leagues yet, very likely is not going to happen anytime soon. And chancing getting hurt is going to be the path that most guys take, because it just makes sense. Okay? So here's what I see happening. Okay? Here's how I see things changing a little bit, and the narrative changing. Teams will begin factoring in surgery as a likely option for older guys, especially the Garrett Coles and whatever. And so the contracts are going to be built with that year in mind. If they haven't had Tommy John and they're 33, 32, and we're signing them to a 4-year deal, there's a very good chance that they're going to need it at some point in this period of time. And that is factored into the contract. It's probably already started happening. It is just one of the things that happens with baseball. It might not happen, but it's more likely to happen, in my opinion. Believe it or not, 2/3 of all reconstructions are done on kids 16 to 20 years old, non-professional players. It all comes back to the incentives and guys pushing themselves so hard so they can play at the next level. We have to find a way to divorce these incentives for pushing yourself too hard from being able to move on to the next level. But I don't know how to do it, but that is what needs to happen. And unfortunately, it's really hard to do. So, what can a player do on their own in order to make sure they are in position to stay healthy? Make sure you are warming up sufficiently and the whole kinetic chain is working as it should. And then take your recovery extremely seriously. If you're sore, take a day off from throwing, because it's not about throwing through soreness, it's about your body changing because you are sore. And if you don't pay attention to that stuff, your body will start to shut things down and you will not be conscious of it. And that is what causes his injury most of the time. So take warming up extremely seriously and take recovering your arm extremely seriously. And you'll put yourself in a position to avoid this, at least until there's a saying in professional baseball. If you're going to get Tommy John, get it in the big leagues. And that's what I did. Tommy John sucks. Let me know down in the comments what you think. And that's it. Don't get Tommy John. Avoid it if you can.